Hold on. Good evening. Welcome to The Horizon, the voice of the Amber woman. My name is Dr. Patience Abiedu, and I'm your host for today's program. I usually start the program by extending special greetings to all our IDPs, internally displaced persons that are residing in La République du Cameroon and also in different parts of southern Cameroons. In fact, those in La République du Cameroon should be considered refugees, really. I also want to salute those who are refugees in neighboring Nigeria, Ghana, and other parts of the world, and all Southern Cameroons and Ambazonia in the diaspora watching this program. Special salute to our ASA that defend our territory, because as you know, 2 maps were presented to President Biya in 2010 depicting the different territorial boundaries. So we are 2 different people. So today's program is Cross and Conflict, Papal Power and the War in Southern Cameroons. And this is coming at eve when we know we've heard of the visit as slated for April. So tonight we will examine this highly anticipated and politically sensitive visit from April 15th to the 18th. Pope Leo the 14th is scheduled to visit Cameroon. So a white aircraft bearing the flag of the Vatican City is expected to land somewhere in Cameroon. And on board will be the Pope. So who is the Pope? In brief, he is a shepherd to billions of Christians, particularly Catholic, worldwide. He's the head of state of a nation, Vatican City, and he is the moral voice in a fractured world. But this visit comes at a time of deep wounds. It comes at a critical moment. There is a war in Southern Cameroons, which started in November of 2017 by it comes when there's a contested 2025 presidential election. Well, that has nothing to do with Ambazonia, of course, but I have to include it. And especially these 10 decades, 10 years, a decade of war between La Republique and Ambazonia. They like to call us separatists, but I always say we are not separatists. We are people of the former British Southern Cameroons, going back to what we had before, because La Republique left us when it changed the name from Federal Republic to La Republique de Cameroon. So they are the separatists. So the question we want to examine today is, can this visit help bring a permanent solution to the war in Southern Cameroons? And how likely is it that it could push for international recognition of Ambazonia? So let's examine that. But before we delve into that, I want to say this, that there has been 4 Papal visits to Cameroon since 1960, when La Republique had its independence, and since 1961, when Southern Cameroon had its independence. So there have been 4 Papal visits, and in a nutshell, I just want to list them, and we're going to talk briefly about them and then focus on the crust of today's topic. So here we go. John Paul II visited Cameroon in August of 1985. I'm just listing them now, and then when I go talk about them, we can see the pictures more clearly. Pope Benedict XVI visited Cameroon in March of 2009. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, representing Pope Francis, visited Cameroon in January to February of 2021 to convey the Pope's message of peace and reconciliation. And now the anticipated visit of Pope Leo XIV is scheduled to visit Cameroon in April of 2026 as part of his African tour. So let's now focus on this topic. Going back to the previous visits. In August of 1985, Pope John Paul II visited Cameroon shortly after a failed coup attempt against President Biya. So there seems to be a history when these visits occur. Something significant, something negative would have happened in the nation. So that's when Pope John II, if we can see an image of him, that will be fine, when he visited Cameroon. There it is. And then the next one that I want to briefly talk about is in March of 2009, Pope Benedict XVI traveled to Cameroon following the constitutional amendment that removed presidential term limits. So that was a tough time that caused some dissident in the nation, and some people were killed because of the protests that this brought about. There we see that Pope Benedict XVI in 2009. And then Cardinal Pietro Parolin in 2021, also representing the Pope, visited Cameroon, and there are some pictures of him even in Bamenda. So if we can see those images. So that's the most recent visit of the Pope's representative. Let's look at it, with some government officials and some clergy members. Thank you for that image, because that's the most recent one that we've seen, and that was the highest person to visit recently, representing the Pope. So yeah, there's some more images. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about this particular visit because it was in the middle of the peak of the war, and His Eminence Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Secretary of State of the Holy See, visited Cameroon on the 28th of January 2021 and stayed through the 3rd of February. During this week-long trip, he met with government leaders, Catholic bishops in Yaoundé, and visited the Northwest region, where he celebrated Mass and conferred the pallium on the Archbishop of Bamenda. I believe at that time was Kia. So the question is, what is the significance of conferring pallium? I read on, it says, the pallium is a white woolen band worn around the shoulders of a metropolitan archbishop. It is blessed by the Pope on the feast of Saints Peter and Paul and symbolizes unity with the Bishop of Rome, authority over an ecclesiastical province, and the shepherd's role of carrying the flock. So the question is, why was it significant in Bamenda? So when we ask this question, it's saying that it's really means that there's a strong Vatican solidarity with the Northwest region. Bamenda is in Cameroon's Anglophone Northwest region, which has been heavily affected by armed conflict since 2016. By personally conferring the pallium there, the Holy See demonstrated closeness to the suffering communities. It sent a message that the church had not abandoned the region. It elevated Bamenda's pastoral situation to global attention. So I just wanted to put this in perspective as we move on to this topic that really focuses on Pope Leo's visit. All right. So in summary, the one in March 2009, when after the constitutional changes removing presidential term limits, protests erupted, and then soon after Pope Benedict arrived. And the takeoff message was that he came to symbolize unity, to have some sort of unity, and to endorse the government, unfortunately. So he's trying to create an atmosphere of peace where he says, we are with you, the government, we are also with the people. And when there's political tension, how do you reconcile both when one part is really wrong and has done harm to the people, and the other party is the weaker party? How do you reconcile those together? With the presence of the Pope, it's some sort of like an umbrella to shield and make people feel that the Pope is there, so peace, therefore, is in place. But this is really artificial because it doesn't last. Okay, let's now go back to the power of the Pope. What is going to be happening now when we see the presence of the Pope? The war in Southern Cameroons, we remember, started when the lawyers and the teachers went on a strike to demand just some basic changes. And I keep on saying every time I have the opportunity to bring this up that if Biya had just responded accordingly at that time, where the legal system, the common law, was allowed to prevail in the former British Southern Cameroons territory, and where our educational system was not diluted, where we had our English people teaching our students. Our teachers are not Francophones teaching us and in the pidgin English, and not really conveying the right material to our children. This war most probably would not have happened, because soon after the teachers and the lawyers went on the strike, we could tell that we are really two people. We could tell that despite all the marginalization that we've been crying for over the years, those in power, Biya and France, and those who control the narratives, were not listening. So in 2017, then President Sissoco then declared that our independence had been restored. And now we start hearing the name Ambazonia more frequently. So the clashes really intensified. We know that Biya then in November of 2017 really pushed the agenda of a war, thinking that it was something that was going to last for 2 weeks. And here we are, 10 years, almost 10 years later, and the country, both La République du Cameroon and Southern Cameroons, are suffering. So this visit at this time, we're trying to examine and ask questions. What difference will it make? So the question is the power of the Pope. The Pope is not only a religious leader, he's also a diplomat. I remember at one time when we were in Team Ambazonia, there was the talk of possibly having the Vatican City headed by the Pope to mediate between Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon. That conversation came up. And some people were afraid of it, that, it may be a mistake because the Pope will most likely take the side of the government of Cameroon. And so that was not really pursued that much. The Holy See maintains global relations and has mediated conflicts before. If you go back and look at the history, there has been some cases where the Holy See has been instrumental in resolving conflicts. But recognition of a new state, geopolitical, not only moral. So the Vatican traditionally supports territorial integrity and dialogue within states. So this is crucial, right? If the Vatican traditionally supports territorial integrity and dialogue within states, what does that mean for Southern Cameroons? What does that mean for Ambazonia? We could argue that there are really two territories. I go back to the maps that were shown by the United Nations Secretary General, who was visiting Cameroon in 2010. Those two maps signify that we are dealing with two territories. And so we like the Pope to remember that if he's someone who supports territorial integrity, then that territorial integrity involves two distinct people that have a distinct territory, distinct boundaries, and that has to be recognized, that has to be supported. And so the dialogue then will be between the leaders from those two distinct territories. So let's talk about the expectations and the realities. The question is, could recognition really happen? Could there be international recognition of a new state? Could there be effective territorial control? Could there be a functioning government, which means that can Ambazonia continue to live now on the ground? Because right now we are a government in exile. Could there be recognition by major powers of the world? Could there be admission to the United Nations? So these are questions that we ask, and we are just sometimes hopeful that perhaps one of them will be answered. Only God knows what will come out of this visit. So the expectations and realities among us Southern Cameroonians, some hope that the Pope visit will push for recognition. That's what we are hoping for. I just listed a few things. We'll push for recognition. But history tempers, history brings down expectation. When we examine history based on what we've just said, the three preceding visits that happened, what really became of them? They were just visits that helped to tone down the people's aggravation, to provide an environment where people will just stay, accept the status quo and think that it is some form of peace, which we know it's not. So we're asking that, will there be likely calls for dialogue when this continues or when this happens? Are we expecting reconciliation? And that word reconciliation is very dangerous. It could be looked in two ways. Are we reconciling the fact that there are two nations, Southern Cameroons and La République du Cameroon, that want to live separately as good neighbors? Or is the Pope asking for reconciliation that maintains the territorial boundary that they have imposed on us because they have come into our land? La République has invaded Southern Cameroons. And is that the reconciliation that he wants, that, let me just use another description, that Francophones and Anglophones, which I don't like using, but for the sake of argument, Francophones and Anglophones will reconcile and stay together as one people, knowing, even despite all the marginalization and assimilation that has happened over the years? Are we talking about unity in the same context? Are we talking about bringing these two very culturally different sets of people with different origins, with different mentality, to put them together, unify them in the sake of peace, because the Pope has spoken. And then, of course, the word peace resonates. You think about peace all the time. You want our people to be able to travel from point A to point B without aggravation. You want them to have access to school, our kids to go to school without fear of being killed. You want people to be able to do business and pursue happiness under this construct, and live as if there was no past. Meaning that forget about the history, forget about the fact that in 1961, when we came together as a federal nation, it was supposed to be two states with equal powers, exerting their own rights and governing their own people. Are we supposed to forget all about that when we talk about unity and peace? We ask all these questions because when the Pope comes, we expect, we hope that he's coming with the knowledge of all of us, that there's a people, you want to call them the minority English-speaking people. There are people that have been fighting to be free for over 60 years. Mind you that in 1961, after we became a federal nation, and soon after, when we realized we had been lied to with the changes made by the government, we've been fighting since then to go back to what we were. Remembering that we had our own government when our forefathers left Enugu, Nigeria in 1959. I'm sorry, in 1954. So we have had the experience of governing ourselves. So when the Pope comes and will be preaching unity and peace, will he reflect on where we came from? Will that be even part of the picture? So we want to ask these questions because a lot of people are anticipating this this visit. And in terms of the fact that there has been an election, which I will always say that doesn't involve us, but of course the Pope has that in mind. Will he want to bring peace to the people of La République du Cameroon? That yes, we understand that you went to the polls and you chose Icha Chiroma to lead you, but Biya is still there. Or will he still continue to recognize Biya, despite the fact that he's not come up with his government since this November when the election took place and he won? So there are so many questions that we are asking, and some of them concern us Southern Cameroonians, some of them do not, but we want to ask and put everything out in the open. So now the issue of legitimacy or moral weakness. So critics argue that papal visits strengthen entrenched power. So that means that the power that is in place when the Pope visits, they are strengthened to continue with their agenda. They will not look at what the people are crying for. But then supporters argue that the Pope visits people, not presidents. So these are two different things here. So if the Pope, if it's believed that when the Pope comes to a territory or a Pope's representative comes to a territory, there is some sort of communication, some sort of interaction with the highest government personnel, which will, in this case, will be the president of La République du Cameroon. And what conversation is taking place? Is there a conversation saying that, oh, you're doing a great job, continue to keep your people together, make sure that you do things that your people will stay at peace? Or will the Pope speak some diplomatic language and challenge the ruling authority that, well, we've observed that there's been so much humanitarian problems. People have died. There are so many refugees. There are so many IDPs. What have you done about it? Will such a conversation come up? So those who are supporting the Pope's visit, if they believe that the Pope is coming not for president, but for the people, how will this papal visit elicit? How will it help the people, present their problems? Because sometimes there's feeling that, oh, the Pope has arrived, the Pope will bless us. Yes, the Pope blesses the nation, blesses the people. But how does that translate to that mother out there who has lost so many children due to the war? How does that translate to those children that have no opportunity for the future because of the way the government is, in terms of the fact that those from Southern Cameroons, Amazonia, have no future per se? Those who are children from French Cameroon, they've been plucked in the system to take charge, to be the leaders, to run the country, the two countries together. They are the leaders. Our own children, Southern Cameroons, are those that are doing mediocre work. They don't have the opportunity to grow and shine and be at the forefront of leadership. So the impact will depend on what is said. So, we're asking all these questions because we really don't know, right? We're just projecting, and we ask these questions based on what has happened in the past. So the impact will depend on what is said and what is not said. So will the suffering be named? I already asked. Will there be mention of those thousands of lives that have been lost? We've lost more than 60,000 people. Will there be mention of that? Will there be mention of the suffering of the people? And recently, we know that homes were burned down in an area in Ndongamantu. Recently, we saw images of mothers in the bush because they don't have any place to go to live. So, will there be specific accounting of the suffering of the people? And then the other question, will dialogue be urged, right? And when we talk about dialogue, La République has already tried so many different types of dialogue. The Grand National Dialogue 1, Grand National Dialogue 2, and recently a reconciliation thing that came up in 2025, just before the election. So there have been different types of dialogue, but these dialogues have not come up with anything substantial. They've not been credible dialogues. You don't want dialogue for the sake of dialogue. So we're hoping that if the topic comes up from the Pope, from this authority that is respected worldwide, it should be the type of dialogue that makes a difference. It should be the type of dialogue that is really looking at two opposing people. The government of Southern Cameroons in exile, their leadership, and La République du Cameroon. Because as we say, even in 2021, when the U.S. The resolution 684 from the United States by the senators as resolution 684 came out, it is spelled in that document that there should be a dialogue between the parties of the conflict without any pre-existing conditions set. So will this type of dialogue, mention of this type of dialogue, come up from the Papal's visit? Because only that type of dialogue will make a difference. Anything else is a waste of time, waste of energy. And then the next thing after dialogue, which always comes up, is reconciliation. Reconciliation. Will that be prioritized? And my fear about this word reconciliation again is that what are we reconciling? Are we reconciling the fact that Southern Cameroon's ambassador should just give up and say, oh, La République du Cameroon, President Biya is the president. We are tired of a 10-year war. We'll just go with the flow and there will be imaginary peace? Or is there going to be a reconciliation where you realize that for there to be any long, permanent peace in both regions, the reconciliation will be based on the fact that there's recognition of two different people. So this reconciliation that we want will be the one that is based on the fact that you're recognizing that two nations exist. And those two nations can peacefully coexist side by side, with both benefiting from each other. We have a lot of wealth in our territory, which La République du Cameroon has extorted over the years. But of course, through reconciliation, we'll find a way for them to benefit a little bit from our resources. That's the type of reconciliation that Southern Cameroon's ambassador would hope for. But what will come from Pope Benedict's visit, we will find out when that happens. And then we ask this question again: could this visit bring a permanent solution? And then I'm talking about the same things that I've mentioned, but I'll probably expound more. So could there be a permanent solution in terms of permanent peace, in terms of political negotiation, in terms of security guarantees, in terms of constitutional reforms, or international mediation? So let's look at that one at a time. Permanent peace. Permanent peace requires all those things that I mentioned: political negotiation, security guarantees, constitutional reforms, international mediation. Now, if the Pope's visit has anything to do with constitutional reforms, they just had the election again, so we don't know what, if at all, he will mention anything about the election, knowing that right now it's believed that Biya is a president, and we don't know if the Pope will mention Isa Chiroma at all. So let's listen for that. And the political negotiation that we are hopeful for has nothing to do with what is going on in La République du Cameroon in terms of the election. The political negotiation that we are looking for is for the Pope to realize that there's really a people called Ambazonia Southern Cameroons, that we are not a joke, that for so many years there has been ghost towns or country Sunday, because people have observed this because they believe that they deserve to have a country on their own. That is a statement right there. That is a political statement, a stance made by people because they believe they have the right to govern their own territory. In terms of security guarantees, yeah, we know that La République has sent B to destroy our areas. They've burnt so many villages over the years. They've killed so many of our children. The Pope will always come up thinking about all the massacres that have happened. Gabu massacre, Pinyin massacre, the Guzang massacre, the Kumba massacre, the prominent killing of baby Martha, baby Brandy, Caroles, the picture of that child being burnt alive. Will all this play? Will the Pope have all of these images going into this? Because this shows the suffering of the people. This shows that our people, those of the former British Southern Cameroons, have suffered tremendously and continue to suffer. And if one of the messages of the Pope is to bring an end to their suffering, will that mean that there will be recognition of all these genocidal activities that have transpired for almost 10 years? That is a question we are asking. So, in terms of constitutional reform, we don't care about that. That has to do with La République du Cameroun. We don't know if the Pope will look into that and see how there can be some sort of constitutional reforms that pull in Ambazonia to appease us. But we don't want that. The only way to appease Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia is to let us be. I don't want to say let us go. I want to say let us be, because we were people that existed in the past and we want to come back and be what we had experienced so our people can learn to thrive in an environment that is favorable to them. Not an environment that they are recognized as second-class citizens, as special status. Remember, the phrase special status came as La République during its Grand National Dialogue was trying to create some sort of environment for us to feel that we belong. But that also is counterproductive, because if they're already telling that you're a special status people, that means that you're different. So you cannot be seen as the core people because you have a different nomenclature. At this point, I would love to see some of the images of the Pope visit, the last Pope Benedict. If we can have some of those images on the so that people can remember what it looked like. If you can see that while I come to, I want to read something because this visit had the women's, we had to write something. Yes, let's look at these images while I pull this up because it's important. Thank you so much. So I want to read this because I want to read something that we as mothers, we as women wrote to the Pope to consider, and coming from the angle of women, and for the Pope to consider as he makes this visit. And just a paragraph that I want to read, and then I read the whole text. Your Holiness, women are the heart of the family and the foundation of society. When women suffer, the suffering reverberates through generations. In this Jubilee spirit of mercy and renewal, we entrust our plea to your pastoral care and prayerful intercession that truth may illuminate the path to reconciliation. Justice may restore trust, and peace may take lasting root in our land. So that is a caption, but let me read what we wrote to the Pope. To His Holiness Pope Leo XIV, Your Holiness, with profound respect and filial devotion, we acknowledge the anticipated apostolic visit of Your Holiness to Cameroon on sometime in March or April of 2026. In this moment of pastoral significance, I write on behalf of the women of the former British Cameroons, also known as Ambazonia. We are mothers, wives, daughters, sisters, and faithful members of our communities who continue to carry the deepest wounds of the protracted conflict that escalated in late 2017. While the attention of the international community has been drawn to other global crises, the suffering of civilians in the Anglophone regions of Cameroon remains acute and too often overlooked. The historical trajectory of the former British Southern Cameroons, from its status as a United Nations Trust territory under British administration to the reunification of the 1st of October 1961, is well documented. Over the decades, concerns have been expressed within our communities regarding political marginalization, the progressive erosion of constitutional guarantees, and structural inequalities. In recent years, the humanitarian consequences of the conflict have been devastating. Independent reports indicate substantial loss of life, destruction of villages, widespread internal displacement, refugee flows in neighboring countries, large numbers of detainees, and hundreds of thousands of children deprived of access to education. Women and girls have borne a disproportionate share of this suffering, facing heightened risk of violence, exploitation, trauma, and the fragmentation of family life. Your Holiness, your pastoral presence in Cameroon represents a singular moral and spiritual opportunity to encourage healing, reconciliation, and renewed commitment to justice. The church, as a mother and teacher, has long stood as a voice for the voiceless and a defender of human dignity. We humbly ask that during the following we appeal for the release on fair and transparent judicial review of individuals detained in connection with crisis consistent with international legal standards and the principle of justice. I bring this back to remind us that the Naira 10 who were arrested because they were Southern Cameroonians, and they've been there languishing since January of 2018. Inclusive and good faith dialogue. We respectfully request encouragement for meaningful and inclusive negotiations between the parties without preconditions, building upon previous mediation initiatives, including the Swiss facilitated process and guided by sincere commitment to reconciliation. Your Holiness, women are the part of the family and the foundation of society. We women suffer this. When women suffer, the suffering reverberates through generations. I read this already, but that was the conclusion of the article of the materiality to the Pope. So we trust that your apostolic visit will serve as a beacon of hope and a catalyst for the healing among all communities affected by the conflict. With profound respect, and in filial devotion, Dr. Patience Abiedu, on behalf of the women of the former British Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia. So this is a message of what we expect of the Pope. But we ask the questions that, will it make a difference? We end this program with that question. Will the Pope visit? Will the cross, the cross, the Pope signifies a cross, and the war that is going on is a conflict. What will come about between the cross and the conflict that has ravaged our land for almost 10 years? A lot of people are excited. They're anticipating this visit. There are some who are Christians that will just be satisfied that the Pope has landed in their territory. The Pope has touched, the feet of the Pope has touched the soil of Bamenda, and that's good enough for them. The town of Bamenda has been blessed by the Pope, and that's good enough for them. But there are others who are asking the question, will this visit by the Pope make or lead to permanent solution of the war between La République du Cameroon and Southern Cameroons? That is the biggest question. What are the potential outcomes? Will there be just the regular song of peace and reconciliation without looking into truth, without seeking justice through truth that has been the matter for over so many decades, more than 5 decades, almost 6 decades? Because again, if that happens, then in my opinion, the cross would not have affected the conflict at all. If that happens, then it will appear that the people of Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, do not matter to the leader of the holy city. If that happens, it will mean that the Pope and his predecessors have always supported the government and not the suffering people. If that happens, then it's up to Ambazonians, up to Southern Cameroonians to find a way to make sure that our territories remain Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, to find a way to make sure that the fact that the United Nations convoy showed those 2 maps mean a lot and should never be disregarded. And we believe that if the Pope were to see things through the eyes of Southern Cameroons, Ambazonia, and even La République du Cameroon, and realize that trying to find that solution that will bring permanent peace, in the long run, without being political, peace will come to both regions. And that's the type of peace that he should be looking for towards. So as I conclude today's program, those questions remain unanswered. Yes, we are thrilled that the Pope will be visiting at this time in our history. We're thrilled that there may be an opportunity for the war to come to an end. There may be. That is the hopeful language of those of us from Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia. We are thrilled that there may be a possibility of our children and great-grandchildren having a peaceful future grounded on a great foundation where Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia would have provided them with the education that they need to be a force to reckon with in the world. Because without a great, solid education, our children will be lost forever. We want those opportunities. So with the Pope's visit, we think about all that can possibly lead to that. But we see that I started the program by talking about the 3 previous visits that have come from Papal visits, and what were the significance of those visits. Did it lead to a better future for Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia? You answer that for yourself. Will things be different this time? Perhaps. Because we understand La République du Cameroon is financially bankrupt. The country is falling apart. So maybe it's time for things to be different. Maybe it's just the moment, the right moment. You know, in life, there's a special moment that God chooses to have major changes. Maybe this April, when Pope Leo XIV arrives Bamenda and leaves, because certain things may not happen while he is there. Maybe after he visits and leaves, maybe he will do things differently. And maybe that reconciliation that is used all the time will happen when there has been a negotiated settlement, when La République and Ambazonia have sat down as equal partners to resolve this matter once and for all. So I thank you for being on the horizon, the voice of the Amba woman. I'm sure we'll have more to speak or talk about after the Pope's visit. Only then will we know what transpired, and only then we will know how Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia benefited, if at all, from his visit. So thank you for watching the program today. I thought that following the letter that we wrote as women, this will be a good topic to explore. And I hope you've enjoyed the program today. I wish you to have a good weekend, and we will keep on praying for the Pope as he prays for us. And we'll see you next time. Have a great weekend.